to the podcast Transformations, Stories of Change. My name is Nic Banck, and on this episode, I have my good friend Per as a guest on the show. How are you doing today, Per?
I am good, thank you. And yourself?
Great, great. Thank you. Even though I said I wouldn't be doing a lot of podcasts, I am actually recording yesterday, today, and next week also. So I'm just really
Your
finding
podcast
this.
stuff.
This is my little free space, in
All
the
right, fair
busy
enough.
life of everything. Per, today is actually all about you. So, even though that you and I know each other for many moons, we've gone to school together. But for those that don't know you, would you mind just telling the listeners just a bit about yourself?
No, I'm happy to. I mean, who doesn't? So, I guess, where does one start, right? No matter how often you prepare to share your story, you're always like, woo. But my professional life has been a lot about play, and mostly Lego series play. So I have a background shortly with the Lego company, and before that I pretended to be a consultant for a brief period, management consultant, and then back in the dark ages when I was really young, I was a trained wine merchant. So I have a bit of wine in my background, and but then quickly into Lego company, right? And where I came across this thing called Lego Serious Play, which was back then a little project, which was being developed by a small group, and I just came across that in really early days, semi-randomly on the internet, Lego internet, and just went like, this is what I want to do. And so I connected with them, and then I've been part of developing Lego Serious Play as a business model and as a method since then. And this was 2001. Yeah, and so I've been playing seriously ever since. Lived in a couple of different countries and worked practically all over the world. I just came back from Bogota 48 hours ago, and on Tuesday I'm off to Bangkok. Yeah, so it's all about Lego Serious Play, basically. That's what I do.
Yeah. Wow.
In
Yeah.
one way or another.
Anybody that follows you on LinkedIn can see that you are literally whizzing around the world, having a nice lunch here, having a airport coffee somewhere else, literally the next day.
Exactly.
Wow.
And if they follow me on Instagram, they'll see the wine I drink and the coffee I drink as well. But I keep that off my LinkedIn. But yeah, there you go. So I play, eat, and drink. No, and run. I do the occasions run.
I think you, as far as I know, you do more than the occasional run, right? You are quite the runner, some would say, yeah. So Per, thank you so much for your introduction. It's great to hear your story about play. And during our preparatory call, I asked you to consider some sort of a transformative experience that we could talk about on the podcast.
Yeah.
So this could be something that you have experienced in your personal life or your business life. But just before we go into that, if you were to share your own definition of transformation, what would that sound like?
Yeah, I guess transformation is something so hyped. We'll talk about it. I think transformation for me, as I kept thinking about it, of course, is a thing that can only be observed in the past. Aspired or desired transformation is one thing, but I think transformation can actually only be observed in the past, because you don't know that something or that you have transformed until you see it from the vantage point of the future, so to speak. So I think transformation is only something we can observe in the past, and I think we need to accept that. And I'm trying to come to that acceptance myself. Yeah, I think so. I think everything is always transforming. Therefore, transformation can only be observed in the past.
Wow. So we can we can have hopes and dreams and aspirations and make plans, but we won't really know until we got there. Is that sort of the point?
That's sort of what I'm saying.
Yeah.
And then accepting that we are always transforming, and inevitably, right? And so you can only observe transformation from the vantage point of the future. So it's a thing in the past in that sense, right? And accepting that we can have a desired transformation or an aspired transformation is another thing, right? But with all the stuff that can happen and which is happening, and I know we all like, I mean, a few years ago we all said VUCA, and now we probably say something different. But the thing is that everything is always changing, and therefore we are always transforming. So this idea that we can control and plan a transformation, I actually think is like, because something weird is going to happen tomorrow anyway.
Yeah.
That's sort of my take on it.
Yeah. Interesting. It sort of leaves me just wondering whether we should be sort of positively hopeful, or whether we should, should we do our best to so we say to prepare for the transformation, or should we go about our business as we had always intended to do? I mean, how ambitious should we be if we won't know until afterwards?
Well, I think that's actually a reason for being ambitious. I do. And I think being prepared for transformation is of course good. I think intending transformation is also good. I think so intending transformation, I think is maybe one way to think about it. And with that I mean setting yourself up, in, if you want, your external world up for the transformation you would like. I mean, I have ideas about how I would like my kids to develop. I have ideas about how I would like to develop. I have ideas about how I would like my partnership with my supreme leader, other, to develop, right? I have intentions about how I would like my business to develop, and I'd like to intend those transformations by setting up the best possible conditions. You spoke about my running, for example, and so I have ideas about runs I want to do and ways I want to run. So that means I need to intend the transformation of my body. But whether I actually can do that thing, I will only. I mean, once I've completed the run, I know. I mean, let me take another example. Sorry, I'm rambling now. But years ago, before I ran, it was actually my brother who got me into running, right? Because he was doing running, and so he said, "Hey, I think you would like it." I'm like, "Are you serious? I hate running. I mean, that's really where I came from. Running is not me, right?" So I didn't run. And he liked it. So I'm like, okay, my brother and I like many of the same things. Professionally, I mean, we do this kind of work now, and that's all right. If he says so, let's give it a shot, right? So, and I went from not a runner to doing an ultra, which is anything more than marathon. So I did a 60K trail run.
Yeah.
And so so that's what I mean. I intended to do that. So I intended a transformation where I would become the parent that could do that. Yeah. But not until I had done it did I know that I had actually transformed into that runner. And so I did. Yeah. But in intending that transformation, I changed something in how I live, and I started training for running, of course, right? So so that's the preparation part. Yeah. I couldn't know what would happen. I got an injury shortly before, so there's that, so preparing versus, sorry, because I'm dealing with the preparation right now, but I think intending transformation is stronger than preparing, because preparation can be upended by something in your external world. But if you think of intending a transformation, I think you're more heedful, you're more attentive to what's going on.
Thank you for sharing.
I had not thought of that before you asked me.
Well, that's sometimes what happens during these conversations, right? And I think, I've done, what have I done? About 20 of these, right? And the original idea and still the reason why I keep doing these episodes is because I really want to learn about other people's perspectives, and I always get surprised, in a positive way. Just like our conversation developed, even though we've known each other for more than 25 years, right?
Yeah, we have. Actually,
You still managed to surprise me, Per. Yeah. So in that sense,
likewise.
Yeah, thank you. But really good. So super interesting to hear your perspective. And an example you gave of running that you didn't know until you got there, basically, with everything that it entails, including the intent and the preparation, and then of course the actual execution.
Yeah.
And so Per, we talked about a specific experience that we could talk about on the
Yeah.
podcast here. Which experience did you choose to share with us today?
Yeah. That, there are, of course, I have to say that there were so many, and I've been changed in so many ways. We all have, right? We've all gone through these.
Yeah.
But when you push me a bit, and I thought about what sort of changed maybe the trajectory of my life, was probably when I got into serious play, and it was a meeting with Robert Rasmussen and Bart Victor, who in East Airways then became my managers doing the Lake Serious Play World. So it was meeting with them,
Mm-hmm.
and just hearing about their vision for this thing, which is and which was to become Lake Serious Play. That changed a lot of things in my whatever you want career, but I guess it also changed a lot of ways in terms of my reasoning because I started to think more in terms of play and playing out things and what it does to the brain and how the brain works. So meeting those two, which I did on September 25th, 2001.
There you go. That's very, very specific.
Yeah, no, but it was 14 days after September 11th.
Yes.
Right? It was 2 blocks away from the Twin Towers.
Mm.
And my first time in New York. And one of the first I remember this so clearly. One of the first people I walked past on the sidewalk going to that meeting was Harvey Keitel, who I personally think is a super cool actor, right? Yes. And I get so surprised by seeing Harvey Keitel that I dumped my suitcase, and he looks at me. And I'm proud to say he looks at me as if I'm an idiot. So Harvey Keitel has actually formed an opinion about me for a brief second.
Oh, yeah. You had a piece of Harvey Keitel's mind and
attention, at least, right?
Yes.
I know that. Wow, Harvey Keitel, how many people can say that?
Yeah.
He might have forgotten it, but for a moment he had an opinion about me. And then meeting Robert and Bart in that conversation, that more seriously, that was big.
So you had something. So let's go back to the beginning of the story, right? If you've listened to any of the podcasts, I like to get relatively specific. So here you have sort of stumbled upon what sounds like some sort of a basement project that was on the intranet. You heard about this. You decided to get more into it. Sounded interesting.
Yeah.
And then you find these two guys somewhere, or how did that come about?
So, but I think the whole thing is weird. So I work for Lego. Let's go back to that. I work for the mothership, right? And had an amazing manager, Pam Oshler, a relatively young English woman, and she actually tells me, she calls me on a Sunday, and she tells me last day of my holiday, and summer holiday, right? She's going on holiday on the Monday, so she reaches out to me and says, "Per, I'm going to tell you in all confidentiality," she said, "I'm leaving the company." So I'm like, totally shell-shocked. We had a great collaboration. We're doing change projects together, and when you do change projects, you sometimes need someone to cover your bits to keep you safe, right? And Pam, as my boss, did that. So I was like, "What, Pam? What are you saying?" And Christina, my supreme leader, was standing next to me. And I'm like, "Christina, Pam is leaving." What? So anyway, so I go to work the next morning with that sort of, what am I gonna do now? And the Lego company of 2001 is not the Lego company of 2023. So I was like, what am I doing? And so I turn on my computer, and it's with that unease, or whatever you want to call it. So all my antennas and all my are going on. And then I see this 3 lines of this project. And any other day, with any other frame of mind, I would probably not have noticed it. Right? But because I was in that moment, I was like, what's that? And you and I have the same background from Spurk. Mm-hmm. And this thing was really about, sort of emergence strategy thinking, complexity thinking, the kind of stuff that we were also reading about. And then there was sort of play and some of the learning and development in Lego that, when you work for Lego, you get curious about. I'm like, oh, that's my thing. And that was that feeling, right? Okay, so that was first little nudge from the universe. Now the weird thing is, Robert Rasmussen, so from now on, Robert and I had never met, never spoken, but he was the guy. Coincidentally, we had a one-to-one call scheduled for the Wednesday about a completely different topic, right? Never met the man, never spoken with the man. Pam tells me Sunday, I see this Monday, I have a different one-to-one call with Robert on the Wednesday. He was sitting in the US, I was sitting in London. So I basically sent an email to Robert with the stuff where I needed his feedback. Because Robert is a learning and development specialist, is and was. And I was developing a change tool and I needed his perspective on it, right? So I sent this email to Robert and I sort of finished it off with, Robert, and when we're done with this part of the call, can I ask you a personal question?
Mm-hmm.
Right? And Robert is like, sure. He's later told me, he was like, what does this guy want?
Yes.
Right? Who is he?
Yeah.
So I asked Pam, can I share with Robert that you are leaving? Remember, this was not official yet. And Pam says, yeah, Robert keeps a secret. Robert is one of the good ones, right?
Mm-hmm.
So fair enough. And I take this call with Robert. And at the end of the call, says, okay, Robert, here goes. Pam is leaving. Okay. He says, and I've seen this Serious Play project you're involved in. I want to, can I be part of that?
Mm.
And Roy's like, huh? Maybe, because they weren't looking for anyone, right? It's like, no. And Robert goes like, yeah, maybe. Okay, fair enough. We can talk about that. Mm-hmm. So coincidentally, again, 2 weeks later, we would both be in Billund, where Lego is placed. All right, fair enough. So I'll connect with you there. I said, all right, he says. So I go on the internet, and I check his photo. And then Billund, it's a big marketing conference, basically for hundreds of people. I don't know if they still do it, but they did back then. And you would see next year's products and so forth. So I go there and I spot Robert, right? And we're on these scooters, so I scoot up to him, next to him on the bicycle, and Billund said, "Hey, I'm Per." And he goes like, "Okay, well, let's speak then." And we have an initial conversation, and I share something about my background. I'm ex-consultant, so I have which they didn't really have on the team at that time. I'm an ex-consultant. I'm starting to get this idea about how the brain works a little bit. So Robert says, "Okay, fair enough. You come to New York, and you'll meet with me and Bart. And if Bart is on board, yeah, maybe we could use someone more." So I take a day off from London. So I kid you not, I fly from London to New York. So I fly to New York. And sort of late Monday night, go to bed, Tuesday morning, get up, meet Harvey Keitel, go to this meeting.
Like any Tuesday morning in New York.
Like any other average Tuesday. And I remember flying from London, Heathrow to JFK, right? And there's basically no one on the plane. I mean, it is 2 weeks later, right? Mm. I take a cab in, a yellow cab back then, no Ubers, right? So it's a yellow cab in, and the dust was still hanging over Manhattan. It was a really, and then I walked, to the then Lego Digital, the Lego office in New York back then, that I had back then, and I meet these two. Mm. Robert then for the second time, and Bart for the first time, and we have a conversation, and they show me the lonely guy, which a bit about Serious Play, but this is an iconic picture that we used a lot in Lego Serious Play. So they show me this, and the lonely guy, I now know is this person is not lonely in the sense of lonesome, but they're lonely in the sense of they don't fully get how what they do contribute to the full whole, to the company. They don't feel they have a voice. And these people have an immense potential to be unlocked for the better of the organization or for the better of them. So we often say that, Lego Serious Play exists for the lonely guy to unlock their potential, right? I didn't know this back then. But they show me this beautiful, iconic picture, and Bart asks me, "So what do you think when you see this?" And I shared my story about how I interpreted that visual, right? And somehow that leads. We had a great conversation, and we agreed that they will let me know and I fly home basically, so I can go to work on the Wednesday. And it's a 36-hour trip to New York, right?
Wow.
And I land in Heathrow. I have my phone, right? And I get a voicemail from Robert, who says, "Yeah, we loved it and love to get going," and I'm happy, right? Now at this point, it's Wednesday morning in London, so Robert is asleep, right? So I send him a text message, which we do a lot, right? And now the thing is, early 2000, you don't use SMS messaging very much in the US. So Robert never gets my message.
And what did the message say? What did the
He said,
message
"Yeah,
say?
I'm on board. I love this. I'm confirming that I'm there."
Yes.
Voicemail from Robert is, "We want you if you want us," so to speak, right? I
Mm.
send SMS, "Yes, I'm on board," and then I don't hear from him. Right?
For how long?
I don't know, a week or 10 days. It's enough for me to think this is weird.
Yeah, yeah.
Robert is sitting in New England thinking, why is Pierre not responding? Because he never gets my SMS, because they don't use SMS system back then in the US.
Mm.
So we're sort of, why, where? And I think Robert sort of calls me and says, "Hey, Pierre, I mean, what's happening?" I'm like, "What do you mean what's happening? Why did you respond to my SMS?" And then from there on, it happens. Yeah.
Wow.
But
So
back to my transformation point about the past, I probably wasn't aware that this would be transforming me. I was just curious about something that sounded cool and interesting, but that became a transformation for me in terms of career, in terms of thinking. Yeah.
It's amazing. I think it's amazing to hear your story. That now, when you sort of begin to unpeel the onion and tell the story, almost backwards, and we'll talk about this next week. But we make a lot of plans, but it sounds to me like a lot of what happened to you was completely random, right? It could have been, left, right, or somebody else, right? You could have been in a different state of mind. You could have had a different focus that day.
Absolutely. I took other job interviews in the same period. Of course I did, because Pam was leaving, right? Pam offered me to join her in the company she was going. And what if I had a meeting that morning, so I hadn't seen it on the internet? What if I hadn't had that call with Robert 2 days later planned anyway? I mean, what if she had called me on the Tuesday from her holiday while I was back at work? Then I would never seen it on the Monday, because I don't think I would have noticed it.
No.
So what if, right?
Yeah, it's amazing. And yet here you are celebrating, more than 20 years with playing in a serious way, right?
Yeah.
And that's really great. Per, thank you so much for sharing your experience for this week. So now is the time on the podcast where through the wonders of modern technology, we will experience time travel. And I'm going to snap my fingers, yes. And when we come back after the break, you will have listened to yourself, sharing your experience, and then we'll hear your reflections and maybe some advice to your then self. I'm not going to say younger self, because we're all still young, right? So,
even younger.
Yes. So, Per, with that, take care and talk to you in a week.
See ya.
Yeah. Hi, Per. Thank you for coming back on the podcast today. How are you doing?
Thank you. I'm good. I'm very good. It's a sunny day in Copenhagen, and it could definitely be worse.
Great. Yeah, the sun is really shining here. And Per, I am just so curious. How was it to listen to yourself on the podcast?
Depends on the perspective.
Yeah.
It was. I hate listening to myself. I think most people do. I don't know, but I think most people do.
Remember that I'm a podcast host, so I must enjoy the sound of my own voice to a certain extent. But go ahead. Yeah.
But Nic, I'm not going to say anything about you now, but I think most people love to speak, but hate to listen to themselves. And maybe those that don't become podcasters. But the thing is, okay, so I've been interviewed before for podcasts, and I don't think that ever heard, or videos for that matter, but I don't think I've ever heard more than 2 to 3 minutes of them. It's just, just enough to go like, okay, it seems they haven't sort of deep faked me or anything. But this time we agreed that I would hear the full thing.
Yeah.
So I did.
Very good.
And it was weird. No, it's strange. And I think, I mean, the story was fine. And I relived that story a few times. I think the real challenge was to listen to my current version of myself. Because, that was just, you feel like going, slow down, for example, speak slowly, finish your sentences.
Yeah.
And you know me for what was it, 20 years, right? And I think this has been a 40-year challenge for me. I don't think I've ever spoken correctly. And I tend to make the stupid joke that people listen too slowly. And that I speak at the right pace. But it seems that even I am listening too slowly. So that was really just like, slow down.
Yeah.
Finish your sentences. But there you go.
It's interesting to hear that that's what you're picking up on, your definitely your only tone, your speaking pace, and these parts. And at the same time, I think the best conversations or the best podcasts, the ones that I listen to, are the ones that I enjoy the most, are the ones that are most realistic. I mean, you shouldn't have something that is if that is who you are, that is who you are, right? So let's not make it any different.
But if in that sense who I am gets in the way of, and I'm not sorry, if that part of who I am gets in the way of communicating parts,
the
right?
message, maybe,
then it's not a good thing. And if it's a part of who I am that I kind of actually would sort of get rid of, in the sense that, so that I could be more of myself in that sense, then I think like, come on, you're 52 or whatever I am now. You would think you'd learned it by now, but apparently not, right? So I mean, I'm at ease with it, but sort of listening or staring at one of your own flaws, so to speak, is just like, oh, 25 minutes of me, that's going to be hard.
Yeah. And Pierre, I can solely relate, and I can relate because I actually was a guest on my own podcast a couple of months ago, which was a very weird experience. I didn't interview myself. A very good friend of mine, Noah, interviewed me, and you can find the episode.
Yeah.
And so I know exactly.
Some of it, at least, right?
Yeah, I can. So I can definitely relate. And at the same time, both you and I, we stand in front of people every week, right?
Yeah.
We do trainings, we do workshops, we do seminars, we do presentations, and yet, in sort of a micro snippet, we can get insight to, well, that's what everybody else is seeing. So I think there's it's kind of like a learning lab, right? It's like holding up a mirror, painful as it may be.
Brutal one.
Yeah. So okay. So apart from the cringe-worthy moments, so after listening to yourself, what are your reflections on your story?
Yeah. So it's a story. I mean, I'm really tempted to say none, but that sounds really like I haven't been thinking about it. But it's a story that I thought of a number of times, right? Because it's not random. I chose it because it actually means a lot to me, right? So it defined my career path. It defined lots of my thinking about leadership and who I am, and I mean, just before you and I connected, my meeting was with Robert. So again, it also defined a person I've worked closely with in lots of different, let's say, roles or versions of roles. Let's stay with roles. So in that sense, it was almost comforting to hear it. And maybe the only reason I really could make myself listen to the 25 minutes was that it was a story that I'm actually really happy with, that I was sharing.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's a really meaningful thing for me. It brought me to where I am now. It brought me to working with LSP. It brought me to live in Italy. It actually brought me so many good things, and it brought me a really flexible life, and in that sense, it was comforting.
Yeah. Your definition of transformation, as you shared last time, that you really don't know until after the fact. Did that give any reflections to you?
But no, and it just said it felt right, and I think you asked me last time to sort of would I want to give any advice to my young self, right?
That's what we're going to be doing today.
Yeah.
You can go ahead and do that now if you want.
May I jump to that, because that's actually the one that
please go ahead.
Circling a little bit in my head as I listen to myself, and I really wouldn't. And that's not to say that I necessarily made the right choice, but I really felt that if I was to sit now and advise that person to do something, it would be like saying doing something differently, right? For me, that felt like being unhappy with where I am. Everything I did then, as of course, led me to the life that I live with, the people that I do it with, and the people that I work with. And this doesn't mean I'm really always happy with me, but I'm really happy with where I am. So I can't see any advice I would give to that younger self. I think I was about 30 at the time, right? I really don't. I mean, I'm happy to give an advice, as we spoke about. I'm happy to give advice to the approximately 2 weeks younger version of me, which is slow down when you speak. But other than that, really tempted not to give myself any advice on the broader scale, right? I mean, of course, we can always, well, you should have eaten less chips at that time, but that's sort of the choices I actually made.
Yeah,
I think
it's interesting. On the one hand, it's very so we say, is it deterministic or fatalistic, right? It's very much, you are very much going with the flow, and at the same time, it's not about not making plans and not having ambitions, right?
And I think, agreeing totally with what you're saying, and I think that's almost the distinction I tried to make last time about intending and preparing, right? And because I think the transformations I have had probably might have been intended, but they happened because I wasn't constantly preparing them, because then I wouldn't be seeing the doors that opened to me. We studied the same thing, right? But I didn't study our Sprøjt in Danish to become a manager of a given company. I'm a trained wine merchant as well, in the early days. I very quickly, I knew I was never going to be a wine merchant, but I did it because there was something about it that I really enjoyed. And the joke has always been, that Robert hired me because I knew how to choose the best wine in a restaurant. So it's like, but you see, I didn't intend to be I didn't want to be a wine merchant. I didn't prepare to become a wine merchant, but just that I was one of the things that Robert sort of connected with in a way. I hope it wasn't why I got the job, but it's always been a joke. So I think that's that sort of difference between, or at least in this definition, right, between preparing and intending something.
Yeah. So are we going down the everything happens for a reason road, or is there more direction than that? What do you think?
I don't think everything happens for a reason, but I think that, no, I don't think I think that actually. So I don't know. I don't think everything happens for a reason, but I think if you allow yourself to be present, everything that happens can actually lead to a positive impact. Doesn't mean that everything is good. I'm not, but you can see things. You can turn a given thing into a positive thing. It's more sort of I don't know, it's Stoic or Buddhist. This notion of things happen.
Yeah, I'm sort of thrown back to when I went through Lego Series play training with you. It's now a couple of years ago, and I remember sitting in the workshop, and it took me back to, I guess most people have the same experience. It took me back to when I was a kid in my room playing with Lego. It's like you have all these bricks lying, and sometimes you have instructions, and sometimes you have none, and sometimes you have an idea, and sometimes you have none. And I remember you saying something like, just build something, and it doesn't matter what it is. And here we are. It doesn't matter what it is, but in my mind, I'm trying to form a picture. And what you're basically, I think, as an instructor, is trying to tell me, just let go of all that and sort of just let it. I'm not going to say like let it flow through you, but just build whatever comes to mind. And for me, the magic or the very, very powerful experience is picking up a brick and picking up another one and then putting them together and doing something, right? And something
then it means
happens,
something.
right?
Yeah. And then it means something. It is. Yeah. And yeah. So it's really not about being passive. It's not about being naive, but it's about, intending something, and it's about seeing and listening. And I find, lots of bad things happens, but if you can sort of take the bad out of it, observe it, and then handle it. Sometimes I think about the Wright brothers is also one of my classic analogies. When they, I'm not going to say invented flying, but when they handled flying, they didn't try to, in that sense, neutralize gravity, or they used gravity. Gravity is just a fact, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So I want to go back to the picking up of the bricks. I mean, the element or the elements, whatever you call them there, but I'm sure it's bricks. But how do you and you and I we've done some workshops together, and I'm always amazed at the creativity and everything that comes out of the conversations, out of the sessions when we are just together. But how do you as a trainer work to facilitate that? Is there something that you do you think differently to make that work? I can give an example. You and I were facilitating a workshop together with a large pharmaceutical company, and basically whatever came out of that workshop would be how this company would act for the next year in terms of strategy. So it was important. So and we were there, and then I remember just before the session started, sort of the normal office politics were playing out in terms of people like showing rank, people using their expertise. And then once you started, all that disappeared. And then something completely unique appeared in terms of what was actually built. Is that what is the power of serious play, or is that something else? Or is that pair coming out?
It's the power of Lego Serious Play. It's the power of Lego Serious Play. I'd love to put myself on the, up on stage and sort of say, it's Per doing this. He has a special thing. We tend to joke in Trivium between us that Lego Serious Play, or LSP, is so powerful that even we can do it. It works even with us, right?
Yeah.
But so whether it's LSP or whether it's play can be a long conversation. I think it's both. But there is a magic thing happening when we play, right? And in the Lego Series Play, we do the so-called skills building, where people learn how to use the method, and slowly as they do that, there's a social contract being formed, and there's this safe space that's starting to happen. Because, as you say, hierarchy starts to disappear. We start to establish that today is a day where you cannot be wrong. We start to take away commenting and observing on other people's models with their knowledge, and when that goes out, the hierarchy also goes out. Right? And it's really hard to maintain a hierarchy if you have to accept that the other person is not wrong, and that your observations and your comments are not allowed, won't happen, then there's no hierarchy. Because how can you maintain a hierarchy in those cases?
Yeah.
So there is something about play, that we're using a special. I mean, some of the things that defines play in a sometimes define serious play, but not Lego serious play, is that we're following a specific set of rules that we don't normally follow. We are exploring and we are experimenting rather than actually producing something. Right? It's a special language, special rules, and we're not, and we are coming together to imagine, and we are exploring and experimenting and not producing anything. Right? So we're making sense, special language, and special rules. That that creates this, in lack of a better space, right, where we behave in a really certain manner.
So maybe if you don't have any advice for your old self, what do you think would happen if you try to explain the work that you're doing today to the then person? What do you think would happen? If you say, okay,
Yeah.
so young pair, so in 20 years, this is what you're going to be doing. This is how your life will be. These will be what do you think that situation would be like?
So if we, I think, I'm trying to first right now, I'm trying to figure out how young I should be. And that sounds stupid, right? But because one of the things we talked about last time was this thing that we are always transforming. In transformation, can only be observed looking backwards, so to speak. So to answer your question, I need to figure out how old should I be when I share this, right? Because I definitely, I mean, I we started together, you and I pretended, to be a management consultant for a brief period. And if I go into that's probably where I would go, start thinking about it, and be more surprised about it than today. Because I was probably more, pre-Lego, I was probably more thinking in advisory terms, right? Me knowing and help people know, me analyzing when I want to be a consultant, and me solving things. I remember early thinking that I didn't necessarily want a classic career, but at the same time, I also remember being actually interviewed for a Danish TV channel. It was random. It was me and Anders Boye, that I think you also know a little bit. Coincidentally, we were the ones, right? And it was about becoming entrepreneurs. This notion of, we are in business school. Will we be thinking about becoming entrepreneurs? And I think both of us said, no, not really. We're not really being, let's say, groomed or, for that. So that pair, that version of me would probably be more surprised than the one a bit later in my process. Because I remember becoming a management consultant, which was what I really wanted to, and just realizing that, wow, that wasn't it, right? that wasn't it for me, and that's why I moved to Lego in an actual role and actually worked for a period.
Yeah. So let's go to the moment where I think you said last time that you happened to see something on the internet, which I'm sure was also in its infancy at the time.
Yeah.
And then you decided to pick up the phone, right? So there's a moment there, right, where you say something about, this looks interesting, or this could be something. Yeah.
Yeah.
What was going through your head at the time? Was it okay? I'm gonna investigate this. Let's see how this works out, or how far had you, quote unquote, thought it through?
So I see it Monday, and I had the other call with Robert about a different thing on Wednesday. So I think when I saw that, and yes, it was definitely in its infancy. I didn't have Wi-Fi at home and all of this stuff, right? I'm not even certain we had Wi-Fi either. We probably had cables. Anyway, I saw that. No, that was like more like one of many avenues for me to explore. And I asked Pam, this, can I speak with Robert? Can I mention the situation with Robert? So no, it's much more. It was just, hey, let's. It just my curiosity a little bit, because this notion of play seems to be more than I thought it was, right? The brain was actually a pretty intriguing kind of thing, and then it had this Bart, and the other Professor Johan there. They were in that stuff that we had on Cat Maggot on a master's degree. So it had that emergent strategy touch and complexity. So it was more like it's like if you pass a restaurant, right? And they have fusion food, right? And you go like, oh, it's fusion between Italian and Japanese. I like both kitchens. I wonder what they're cooking. I need to check their menu. I think that's where I was. I hadn't even decided to eat there, but I had to check the menu.
Yeah, it's so interesting to hear you tell your story. On the one hand, you're driven by passion and interest, and things that you experiment with, find out if they are what you thought they were, if there is something else. You find new ways. It almost sounds like stumble. At least you accidentally find this.
A little bit.
Yeah, you go and then you have if it's not a chance meeting, but it's almost a chance meeting. Then you do something deliberate about having a meeting, and then it almost never happens, right? I remember you telling us about the texts, right? It's so close. Yeah. So is it all random, or are you raising the butt finger with only one T?
Because actually, it reminded me of the one advice I would give my young self, right? Would be, if people don't respond to such a message, call them. Right?
Yeah.
Because at that moment, not following up with Robert, that transformation then eventually only happened because Robert decided to be proactive. So that's the only advice I would really give myself. And that's an advice that would still take me to roughly where I am. I would just have been the one to follow up with Robert. Yeah. So when I thought about it, that you just reminded me, that's probably the advice I would give myself.
Yeah.
Anyway, back to what did you actually ask me?
Yeah, I said no. I was just trying to sort of retell the story, and I'm trying to show these different themes between something happened per chance, something happened by I'm not going to say by instinct, by intuition. Some was by interest, and still everything could have fizzled out. Nothing could have happened if you didn't sort of have that connecting moment, right?
And I think a million things fizzle out, as you say. And some fizzle out because we don't see them, and some fizzle out because we don't choose them. Right? We think the window is smaller than it is. I would rather, so to speak, make the wrong decision about a window I see than not seeing the window. And I know I'm starting to repeat myself, and I tend to suffer from the so-called broken record syndrome. The old LPs that can just go in circle and say the same thing. But I think for most people, and I need to say for most people because we're all different and blah, blah, but we are. But sometimes when we are so focused on a given end, we miss that window, right? And then it fizzles out because we didn't see it. It's sort of the attention, selective attention kind of thing. I don't know if you ever saw the thing with the basketball and the monkey. Exactly. Yeah. It's a little bit that one, just applied on life. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So I'd rather see the window and make the mistake of saying, that's too small. I don't fit in that window. But at least I saw it, right?
Yeah.
And I'm certain I made those mistakes. But hey, fine.
Per, thank you for sharing your reflections, and thank you for taking the time to come on the podcast today. It was just a pleasure to connect with you again and hear your story, hear you tell about your transformation, and then reflect back on it. Painful as it may have been, for those of us that were listening in, it was just a pleasure to hear. And I think we touched on so many different subjects from your all the way from your perspective on life and career, including to some of the choices that we make, consciously or unconsciously. Mm-hmm. So in that sense, I want to say thank you for today, and hope to see you soon in person. We live just a few miles from each other, so it should be possible, right?
That's what they say.
Yes, but Per, I want to wish you a happy and safe flights to wherever you go next.
Yeah.
And
it's a short one, by the way.
Okay, what's on your plans in the coming period here?
So I just come back from Thailand, right, and a quick trip to Portugal on the way. Now I'm heading off to Italy, to North Italy, and then I go to Sao Paulo, and then I go to Amsterdam, and then I go to New York, and then I go back to Thailand, and that was June.
And that was only June. Wow, I'm thinking that sounds like the whole year.
Last week of May and June. Yeah, no, that's the wow. That's my last week of May and June plans.
Wow, you travel more than most, I would say. I travel about 50% of the time, but it sounds like you're out almost all the time.
Yeah.
I like it. That's good. Per, good to see you again. Hope to see you soon. Thank you for today.
Absolutely, and thank you. Thanks, Nic.